Let's go ahead and get started. I think most of you all are familiar with the Elders Climate Action, but we have a lot of people tonight because people are very excited about this topic. And some of you may be new uh, to ECA. Elders Climate Action is a nationwide movement of elders working for a livable climate for ourselves and for our children, grandchildren, coming generations, and all of life. And whatever your age, we welcome you to this call and to anything else we do. Now, about this call, we're going to have an hour-long time together. We're going to have about a half hour for presentation, followed by Q&A. We really want to get your questions. Please put them in the Q&A box instead of in the chat. That'll make it a little easier for us to keep track of them. And at the end, we're going to have two important actions for you to take. We're very excited this evening to have Cora Wyent. She is a research associate at Rewiring America. She is conducting research and analysis to enable rapid electrification of everything in our economy. Prior to going to Rewiring America, she completed her PhD in physics at Caltech. She was so excited about electrification as a cost-effective, job-creating, equitable climate solution when she was working with the Sunrise Movement in Los Angeles on Southern California, building electrification coalitions actions, that she has moved into a whole new line of work with Rewiring America. So Cora, we're delighted to have you, and please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. I'm really honored to be here and excited to meet all of you and excited to talk a little bit about the Inflation Reduction Act today. So I will dive right in, and please drop those questions in the Q&A as I go, and I'll do my best to answer them at the end. It's a big and complicated bill, so I may not be able to answer all your questions, but I will do my best. So let me share my screen here. Great. And just going to pull up the chat and the Q&A so I can monitor and make sure there's no technical issues. All good so far? Okay, great. So this is a presentation about what the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, means for you and for your communities. So I wanted to start with just an overview of electrification as a climate solution, because the organization that I work for, Rewiring America, is really focused on electrification. And those are the parts of the Inflation Reduction Act that I'll really focus on today, although I will touch on some of the other components related to renewable energy and other climate solutions. So brief introduction to electrification. In the United States, 87% of our emissions come from energy. So that's burning coal, natural gas, and oil for electricity and to heat our homes and to power our vehicles. Then the rest here you'll see is things like refrigerants and agriculture. And 42% of those energy-related emissions come from decisions made around the kitchen table. So that's a pretty big portion of our emissions, if you think about it, that come down to just household decisions that people are making in the US. So that includes what types of cars we drive. That includes how we heat our homes. That includes how we cook our food, how we dry our clothes, and where our electricity comes from. So those all come down to sort of kitchen table decisions in American households. And now the thing that makes me personally really optimistic about this huge climate solution is that we already know how to produce clean electricity, and we're producing it really cheaply. Solar and wind are some of the cheapest power sources out there, and the percentage of our electricity that comes from solar and wind is growing really rapidly every year. About 20% of our electricity comes from renewables right now, and that's growing really quickly. So this is great. But the problem is that we have a lot of things in our life that don't currently run on electricity. So we're directly burning fossil fuels when we drive our gas cars, and we're directly burning fossil fuels when we're heating our homes with gas or oil or propane furnaces. So the solution here that we're really excited about as an organization is to electrify everything because clean electricity and electrification equals decarbonization. And those solutions alone, that combination of electrification and clean electricity, could eliminate 80% of our energy-related emissions in the US. So that's a huge amount. And the rest comes down to industry and agriculture, which are certainly hard problems, but this electrification of our businesses and our vehicles gets us a huge amount of the way there to really eliminating our carbon emissions. So this is our charge as an organization and as a country. Within the decade, we must change the market default so that efficient electric machines are the most affordable and the most convenient to purchase and install for everyone. So why has this not happened yet? There's a lot of reasons. One is that fossil fuels are just the default. It's the default that if you have a gas furnace, you're going to replace that with another gas furnace, and that creates a fossil fuel feedback loop. Consumers don't know what's available, installers aren't incentivized to install something different, and without scale, the upfront cost of these machines remains high. But we do have this incredible opportunity to electrify our households and our nations, and that's just gotten a lot easier for people thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, which is what we'll be really diving into today. So the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, we like to say that this gives every household in the US an electric bank account with thousands of dollars in it to help them go electric. And part of what we're about is spreading the news about this electric bank account and the amount of money that each household can access. So that was an introduction, and now I'm going to dive into some of the details of this bill and what are these different pieces of your electric bank account and how and when you can access them. So very overwhelming slide, a big table, but I'm going to break this down and talk you through it row by row. So just to give you kind of a big picture of what we're going to talk about today, these are the 5 programs within the Inflation Reduction Act that relate to households and household electrification and renewable energy. So there are 2 tax credit programs and the electric vehicle tax credits, which can be kind of used as a rebate. I'll get into that later. And then there are 2 rebate programs for electrification and energy efficiency. And I'm going to go through these one by one and kind of build up this table as I go so that you know kind of like how this all fits together into a big picture. So the first program that I want to talk about is called 25C, and this is a residential energy efficiency tax credit program. So this has actually been around for a little while, but it's recently gotten revamped and you can get a lot more money now than you could previously for residential energy efficiency and electrification. So this is a 30% tax credit for certain efficiency and electrification measures, and that includes the installation. So it's product cost plus installation. And each household can receive up to $3,200 per year. And the way that adds up is that you can get an annual credit for heat pumps and heat pump water heaters for $2,000. And an electric heat pump is a really efficient way of heating and cooling your home. And then the annual credit for other upgrades like electrical panels, insulation, doors, and windows are capped at $1,200. And certain pieces of equipment have lower caps, but basically, if you take the heat pump cap and the other upgrade cap, you can get $3,200 per household per year. And these are actually available now. So if you installed a heat pump tomorrow, you could go and claim this 30% tax credit when you go to do your taxes. And I also want to emphasize that this is a credit, not a deduction. So if it were a deduction, it would just reduce your amount of income. So the actual amount of money you would get would be about 30% of the deduction or however much your tax percentage is. But since this is a credit, it's directly money back against what you would otherwise pay in your taxes. Unfortunately, this is not refundable, which means that if you don't owe any money in taxes, or if you don't itemize your deductions, you won't be able to take advantage of this tax credit. So in that way, it's not really, unfortunately, targeted at lower income homes, but I'll get to programs that are targeted at lower income homes soon. And this cannot be carried forward. So if you don't owe $2,000 in your taxes, but you do install a heat pump, you can't sort of spread out that tax credit over multiple years. All right, I think I covered everything there. Oh, the last thing to say on this is that this tax credit has certain efficiency requirements that your heat pumps have to reach. So it's really incentivizing people to install efficient heat pumps, which is a good thing because it will lead to better households, less impact on the grid of electrification. But you definitely want to make sure that if you're looking to take advantage of this tax credit, that you get a heat pump to install that actually meets those efficiency standards. All right, so that was the first one, these electrification and efficiency tax credits. Again, target population is everyone who owes taxes, and the maximum amount is 30% up to $3,200 per household per year. So the next one here is 25D, which is the residential clean energy credit. And this one has been around for a while too, but the amount of a tax credit you could get had started kind of ramping down. And this the Inflation Reduction Act bumped the tax credit back up to 30%, extended through 2031. So this is a 30% tax credit for geothermal heat pumps, solar panels, battery storage. That's a new thing that was added in this iteration of the tax credit. And this is basically if you install solar panels or solar plus battery, you can get 30% of what you spend on that back when you go to pay your taxes. And this one, the nitty-gritty about this one is that it is not refundable. So you have to, again, itemize you have to owe something in taxes to be able to take advantage of this credit, but you can carry it forward. So if you spend $20,000 on a rooftop solar system and that gives you a $7,000 tax credit, but you don't owe $7,000 in taxes, you can spread out that tax credit over multiple years. So this is exciting, and it's also retroactive to 2022. So if you installed solar last year, you can take advantage of this higher tax credit level. All right, so that's our second tax credit program here, the solar storage and geothermal tax credits, 30% uncapped, and again, targeted at anyone who owes taxes. All right, so moving on to electric vehicles. So this is for new electric vehicles, the clean vehicle credit, and this is a $7,500 tax credit for new EVs. These credits are income limited. So if you make over $150,000 as an individual, you can't take advantage of this tax credit. And then there are similar limits for other types of tax filers. And one really exciting thing about this tax credit is that starting at the start of 2024, these credits will basically become direct rebates because you'll be able to transfer them to the dealers at the point of sale. So instead of waiting to get $7,500 back on your taxes, or say you don't owe any taxes, you'll actually get basically a direct discount on your vehicle from the dealer starting in 2024. So that was really, really good news and something new this year. And this tax credit previously had a cap on once a manufacturer exceeded a certain amount of vehicles sold, so like Tesla had exceeded this cap, you couldn't get this tax credit anymore, and that cap has gone away now. But what is new is that part of this tax credit is now tied to certain critical minerals and assembly requirements to try to bring manufacturing of EVs to become domestic, and the guidance on that is expected in March. So if you are looking to get this tax credit, but avoid this critical minerals guidance, go out and buy your EV tomorrow, or otherwise, we can see what happens in March and what the guidance is from the IRS on that. So then there's also this new credit for used EVs, which is $4,000 tax credit. And same thing, that there are certain income limits, although these are different than they were for the new EVs. And then these credits are also transferable to dealers in exchange for point of sale rebates. So again, that's really good news for making these tax credits more equitable and available to more people. And that's starting in 2024. All right, so that's the third row of our table here, these EV tax credits for new EVs and used EVs. And these are for anyone below those income caps. So basically for anyone except for high income households, and $7,500 for new EVs, $4,000 for used EVs. So now we're going to get into the final two consumer-focused programs. One is an electrification rebates program, and one is an efficiency rebates program. And this one here is one that my organization advocated really strongly for, so we're really excited about this. And this is called the High Efficiency Electric Home Rebates Program. And this is point of sale rebates for up to $14,000 for lower or moderate income households to get new efficient electric appliances. So there are certain caps on the rebate that you can get that are basically by what piece of equipment it is. So you can get up to $8,000 for a heat pump, up to $4,000 for an electrical panel, up to $1,750 for a heat pump water heater, and up to $840 for an electric or induction stove. So these will cover a significant amount of the install cost of any of these appliances. And for households that are less than 80% of the area median income, so those are low income households, you can get 100% of your purchase costs covered. So if you buy, say you buy a induction stove for $840, you can get $840 back in rebates. And for moderate income households, you can get 50% of your purchase costs covered. So if you buy a $16,000 heat pump, you can get $8,000 back on that. And there's also a $500 contractor incentive here. And the total budget of this program is $4.5 billion. So unlike the tax credits, which are uncapped, which means basically anyone who wants to can take advantage of them, these programs will be more limited in that basically each state is going to be given a budget to spend on these rebates, and will be able to give the rebates to only a certain number of households. And for this program, each state is going to sort of develop their own program to administer these rebates. So they'll likely be available near the end of this year or the start of next year, but they're not available yet, and they won't be available retroactively as far as we know. Oops, okay, so that's these electrification rebates targeted at low and moderate income households and up to $14,000. So then the last consumer program I want to talk about is HOMES, which is home energy performance-based whole house rebates. And this is a similar program in that it has a similar overall budget. It's about $4.5 billion minus $200 million for sort of workforce programs. And this is basically looking at measures that you can take in your home to reduce the energy consumption of your whole home. And the caps, there are two different ways of kind of proving that you've saved energy. There's a modeling approach or a measured approach. For the modeled approach, you can get up to $8,000 if you're an LMI household and 80% of project costs covered. And all other households can get up to $4,000, covering up to 50% of project costs. And then for the measured energy savings approach, the rebate is just based on how much you get in energy savings. And both this and the last program include both single family and multifamily homes. And you can't use these two rebates together. So you can't say, hey, I got a heat pump, So I'm going to get $8,000, but I also reduce my energy consumption. So I'm going to get another $8,000. These programs are sort of, you can't use them for the same piece of equipment, but you can use one of these programs together with the tax credits. Although for the lower income households who would qualify for the electrification rebates, they might not owe taxes, for example. So that's our last sort of consumer focused program here. So this is for whole home improvements, including heat pumps. It's available to everyone. There's no income cap. And for this modeled savings approach, the limit is $4,000 for non-LMI households and $8,000 for LMI households. So let me do a quick time check here. I think we have plenty more time, but I'll just keep this up for a sec for everyone to digest, because I know that was a lot of information pretty fast. So we've got these, again, there are these tax credit programs. There's the EV tax credits, which will transfer to sort of a rebate program in 2024, once you can pass the tax credit off to dealers. And then finally, there are these budget limited electrification and energy efficiency rebate programs at the bottom here. Awesome. So that was all focused on you as a household in the US and what a consumer can do. And now I want to run through what builders or business owners or manufacturers can expect from the Inflation Reduction Act, and a little bit about what local communities can expect to get to. So in terms of workforce incentives, we know that having a really strong built up workforce is really, really important for this electrification mission. There's a huge electrician shortage in this country right now, and we need more electricians, we need more HVAC technicians, and we need better training programs and people who are really equipped to do this sort of electrification work. So there are two programs in the Inflation Reduction Act focused on workforce. The first is, as part of those efficiency rebates, there's $200 million included for states to develop workforce training programs, which is really exciting, that can be focused on energy efficiency or electrification. And then I mentioned before, in the electrification rebates, there's also a $500 installer incentive for electrification projects. But all other rebates must be passed through the household. So, a contractor can't take the $8,000 rebate for a heat pump job, for example. So the next thing here is builder incentives, and these are also related to sort of what business owners or commercial building owners can take advantage of. So the first is this 45L program, which is a tax credit for new energy efficient homes. So there are certain sort of standards that these homes can meet. There's the Energy Star new construction and the Zero Energy Ready Homes program through the Department of Energy. So for multifamily units, the tax credit's $500 per unit, meeting this lower bar, and $1,000 per unit, meeting this higher bar. But those amounts get increased by 5x if certain prevailing wage requirements are met. So a multifamily new construction project could get up to $5,000 per unit with these prevailing wage requirements. And then for single family construction, there's a $2,500 incentive for the Energy Star new construction standard, and $5,000 if you meet this higher bar of the Zero Energy Ready Home standard. And then for builders or for commercial building operators, there's these 179D tax credits. And this used to be a much lower amount, but it's increased to up to $5 per square foot for certain energy efficiency measures in commercial buildings. So that's pretty exciting, and that can make a big difference for a company who leases out an office space and wants to upgrade the energy efficiency. And a tax-exempt entity like a nonprofit can also allocate the deduction to the property designer. So that's why this is sort of grouped into this builder incentive slide. Okay, so now there are certain manufacturing incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act. These are really exciting because this bill in general has brought a lot more manufacturing domestic. Specifically, there have been a ton of announcements that you've probably seen in the news of new EV construction facilities or battery manufacturing plants being built in the US. So this was a great sort of effect of this bill. One thing that this bill did was it increased the budget of the Defense Production Act by $500 million. And half of that is going to go to bolstering domestic manufacturing of heat pumps. Half of that is going to go to domestic manufacturing of critical minerals. There's also manufacturing tax credits for facilities manufacturing clean energy technologies. And then the Loan Programs Office, which is this branch of the Department of Energy that can give out really big loans to help sort of innovative clean energy technologies get started. They got a huge bump in how much they can guarantee loans, basically. So the Loan Programs Office, for example, was one of the sort of parts of the government that helps Tesla get started. They gave Tesla a loan a while ago, so hopefully this will help many more clean energy manufacturing facilities get built in the US. All right, so then there are some building electrification tax credits available to states and localities and nonprofits. So there's this clean electricity investment tax credit. So this can be used for utility scale projects or building scale projects like rooftop solar on a nonprofit institution. And the credit can be claimed even by non-taxable entities like nonprofits. So this was really exciting. And this is a 30% tax credit, similar to the one that I talked about earlier for consumers. And then I already talked about this one, the energy efficient commercial buildings deduction, and how this can be transferred from non-taxable entities to the designers or architects. So that's a really good news too. And then finally, there's this EV charging tax credit. That's a 30% tax credit for EV charging installed in low income or rural census tracts. And again, this can be claimed directly by non-taxable entities. And for localities, so if you're doing advocacy with your local government or something like that, these might be things to ask about. There's $1 billion in grants for the Department of Housing and Urban Development to do these affordable housing energy efficiency retrofits. So that's really exciting for increasing the energy efficiency and safety and health of public or affordable housing. There's some money to help state and local governments modernize their building codes. There's also this greenhouse gas reduction fund, which includes $7 billion that will go to states, municipalities, and tribal governments, and $20 billion to green banks. So green banks, I think that's a really exciting piece of this because that's a pretty big chunk of money basically going to these green banks that can help finance projects using both public and private resources. And then there's a couple of pollution-related grants, climate pollution reduction grants, air pollution monitoring and screening, and then grants to reduce air pollution at ports. All right, so we know this is a lot of information, and particularly with the consumer tax credits, we wanted to give people a really easy and straightforward tool that they could go to a website and see, you know, how much would I get from the Inflation Reduction Act. So check out our calculator. I'll drop the link in the chat in a second. And you can basically enter your zip code, your income, and it will calculate all of this for you about sort of what you might be eligible of those consumer rebates and tax credits that I talked about earlier. So I think that's all I've got presentation wise. And I see there are 30 questions in the Q&A. So maybe I'll stop there and try to answer some of your questions.
Yep. Thanks, Cora. That was a wonderful overview of a huge subject. So we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. One question that seems to be very popular is the heat pump tax credit available if you purchased your heat pump in 2022?
Yeah, good question. The new tax credit is not, unfortunately. I believe there was the old version of that same program. I think there was a $600 tax credit for heat pumps. I will double check that as we're going, but basically this new version of the 25C tax credits is not retroactive to 2022. So, unfortunately, you won't get the $2,000 tax credit if you installed your heat pump last year.
Yeah, the other thing is also to check with your states. The states vary tremendously in what they offer.
Yeah.
The other question is, do you have to itemize to get these tax credits?
Yeah, I think I said that earlier, and I think I was wrong about that. I realized after I said it, but I don't think you have to itemize to get the tax credits. What I will do is the IRS has actually already released like a really comprehensive piece of guidance on the tax credits specifically that's really helpful, and it might answer a lot of questions. So I'm just going to drop that in the chat quickly here. Okay.
And one of our folks from here in Maryland said we have a program, Empower, that's funded by a fee to our utility. We used it to greatly subsidize lots of new installation and heat pump hot water heater last year. Our total cost was less than $3,000. Can we still, I said last year, that's not correct. Our total cost was probably less than $3,000. Can we still take advantage of the tax credit?
Yeah, that's also a good question. So could you read the question one more time? I didn't catch exactly what they had installed.
Here in Maryland, we have a program, Empower, that's funded by a fee to our utility. We used it to greatly subsidize lots of new installation and a heat pump hot water heater. Our total cost was probably less than $3,000. Can we still take advantage of the tax credit?
Yes. So if you installed it this year, so after January 1st, 2023, you should still be able to take advantage of the tax credit. And in that IRS guidance document I sent, they talk in detail about whether you can use this tax credit on top of any local and state incentives you have. And basically the answer is usually yes. And I think, I can double check on this, but I think you don't have to. So say you got a heat pump water heater installed, it was going to be $6,000, but it ended up being $2,000 because you got a $4,000 rebate. I think you can even, I'm not sure if you even have to subtract the rebate off before you calculate your tax credit.
Okay, so
I did see the comment about the chat. I'm gonna look into that in the settings. Well, just keep going on.
Okay,
thanks, Ariana.
Yeah, so sorry, just to clarify what I just said, because you can get the tax credit at the same time as you're getting the state and local rebates, but what the total amount that you calculate the tax credit on, so like what you multiply by 30%, varies depending on what type of rebate it is locally.
So someone's asking if the residential clean tax energy credit is capped, and can you take 30% of the entire cost of a geothermal heat pump as a credit?
It is uncapped, and yes, you can take 30% of the entire cost. So that can be a huge chunk of money back on an installation, which is really exciting.
And is there a limit on the solar credit?
There's no limit on the solar credit. Those are the solar, batteries, and geothermal tax credits are all uncapped. And you can carry them forward for from year to year if you don't, if you end up with a larger credit than you owe in taxes.
And is there any tax credit for community solar?
I believe there is, but I'm not super familiar with that part of the Inflation Reduction Act. So I'd have to get back to you on that one.
And is the clean vehicle income limit the adjusted gross income?
Another good question. Again, so if you go to our Rewiring America calculator link, which we'll either post in the chat or in the Q&A, I know that it says in there, but I don't remember what it is, but I'm pretty sure it's adjusted gross income. But we've got a really comprehensive FAQ as part of that calculator that will have that answer.
And then another person asked about gross income versus taxable income for income levels more generally.
Let me see if I can look that up live, because there have been a couple questions on it.
And also there was someone interested in what the cutoffs are for LMI and moderate.
Yep. So for lower income, it's less than 80% of your area median income. For moderate, it's 80 to 150%. And that area median income varies really widely depending on where you are in the country. So if you go to our calculator, you'll be able to enter your income and see which income you fall into. You can also play around with entering random incomes to see what that 80% mark and that 150% mark is in your community.
Okay, great. So how many years will the EV tax credit be available for?
Good question. Okay, give me 1 second here as I look up this.
I'm thinking 2033, but I may be wrong.
I think it's available through the end of 2031.
Okay, it's definitely more than beyond 2023, which is what the questioner was worried about.
Yes.
Interested in.
Yep. And starting in 2024, again, that will become basically an upfront rebate. Yes, those are through the end of 2031.
Mm-hmm. I was asking, what's to keep car dealers, solar installers, et cetera, from marking up their products by the amount of the rebates and credits?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think there have been some cases where we've seen that happen, but I think the hope is that basically the same thing that sets the prices in the market in any case long term, which is competition between the different dealers, competition between the different installers. So I think there's definitely a chance that people will mark up their prices, but I wouldn't expect to see solar installs suddenly go up by that exact amount of the tax credit. And in solar specifically, that tax credit has been around for a while now. And so I don't think that will, in solar specifically, I don't think that will really change prices.
Also, a lot of people are concerned about when the rebates are going to be available and how to find out about that and how to apply for them. And what happens if you have a heat pump installed before the rebate's available?
Yeah, good question. So for the rebates, that's going to vary a lot state by state. Basically, the funding, the way that this is going to work is that the Department of Energy is going to release guidance on how states should basically set up these rebate programs, and then funding will be funneled to each state. And the state energy offices will individually be responsible for running these rebate programs. So each state could set up a program in a really different way. And each state could have sort of a different timeline for when those become available. I think our best guess is that they'll be available at the end of 2023 or the start of 2024. But again, because that's a $4.5 billion budget, it sounds like a lot, but that will only be available to a certain number of households. It won't be available to everyone. So I think the best thing to do is to just kind of stay posted, figure out what your state energy office is in your state, check their website regularly for updates. But the Department of Energy guidance hasn't even been issued yet, and I think we're expecting that to be issued sort of later in the summer. So you shouldn't expect to hear any news before then. And I think it's it seems very unlikely that any states would apply those rebates retroactively. So like to people who installed a heat pump before the program to disperse the rebates got set up. So I think, you know, I guess the answer to that question would be just kind of stay posted on your state energy offices. Follow us on social media. We will definitely be releasing updates as soon as we hear them on all of this, on when the Department of Energy issues guidance, on when each state is opening up their program, and on how they plan on sort of dispersing those rebates.
Yeah. One thing to be aware of is states are not required to do this. And at least one state has been making noises, that Virginia, that they will not do this. Of course, that's a political decision, and that may mean that we really need to get people in that state active, letting their legislatures or governors know that this is just not acceptable.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and I would strongly encourage people to get involved in any local advocacy related to that. And this is free money for their constituents. Crazier things have happened, but it's silly to refuse this.
Good thing to be working with your local chapter with, or if you don't have a local chapter, finding other allies to work with, and we'd be happy to help you guys with that. If it's an issue in your state. One person was commenting that they live in a 4-unit condo association and want to know if the condo association and or the individual units are eligible for the HERA rebates or other credits and incentives for home electrification.
Yeah, good question. So the tax credits are available to renters and to homeowners. They're not available to landlords, so it has to be your residence. But if you live in a condo, whether you rent it or you own it, you can take advantage of those tax credits if you're allowed to do those upgrades to your own condo. For HERA, that can be, I don't think there's anything that would prevent that from being available to condos. I know that multifamily buildings are eligible for HERA as long as more than 50% of the tenants in that building meet the income requirements. So basically a landlord could do an upgrade and get the rebates from HERA.
I was concerned about needing to replace an old gas furnace before next winter, and the rebate possibly not being available. What can someone do if their income is low and they might have to do something before the rebate's available?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would recommend that in general, I would recommend that people not wait for the rebates. I think because they will only end up serving a certain number of homes. I think, one thing is just start getting quotes for that now so that you know how much it's going to cost. And basically, I think one thing that we've seen a lot is people who get multiple quotes for a project tend to get a much lower cost. You can get wildly different quotes for the exact same project for something like this. Like, one quote will be $10,000 more expensive than another one, or twice as much. So definitely get multiple quotes. That can really help lower the cost. Another thing to look into is whether there are any state or local rebates for heat pumps. You can look at utility programs, city programs, state programs. For example, Massachusetts has a $10,000 rebate for a heat pump, which is huge and helps a lot with the upfront cost. And then the last thing to consider there is that although a heat pump is expensive relative to replacing a gas furnace, you can also keep in mind that it's going to serve as AC for you too. And you won't have to replace your AC if you have an AC plus gas furnace, or you might be getting AC when you didn't have it previously. So that's something that can kind of factor into the decision and the cost, because it definitely can be a big expense for a low-income household. But if you take into account sort of the alternate, which would be furnace plus AC replacement, the gap isn't so big, particularly if there are good state and local incentive programs.
A couple of questions about the homes program, about how the energy savings are modeled or measured, and over how long a measurement period?
That's a good question. I don't know that off the top of my head. I would have to look into that more. You can check our FAQs on our website. Yeah, but I don't want to make a guess. I'm not sure.
Now, one person just wanted to check and make sure that they're correct about this. They just bought an electric vehicle that's eligible for the rebate. If the new guidance in March excludes it, will the car still be eligible for the rebate?
My understanding is that as long as you bought the car before the guidance, you will be eligible for the rebate. So there's this kind of window of opportunity of about 3 months when the guidance wasn't released yet, where you could get $7,500 for any EV, which is, I know that at least one person at Rewiring America who took advantage of that.
Okay. Now, a question: has the IRS provided info on locale restrictions for EV charging installation tax credits for homeowners?
On locale restrictions, I have not seen any yet. I guess that's referring to the fact that the EV charging tax credit is now for people who live in low income or rural areas. Not that I know of. I don't know of like a list of which areas qualify for those yet, but that's a good question.
Are there any credits for adding roof installation?
Yes, there are. So sorry, I'm going to make one final note on that last question on EV chargers. If you did, there was this strange sort of interim period when the tax credits were released, but the updated location hadn't gone into effect yet. So if you happen to install an EV charger in the fall of last year, between when the IRA got passed and January 1st of this year, then I'm pretty certain that you're eligible for the tax credit regardless of where you live. So I'm personally hoping to take advantage of that because we got an EV charger installed in October. And okay, yeah, so that's for the EV charger question. Now on the installation question, yes, so that is included in the 25C energy efficiency rebates. And the cap on everything except for a heat pump is $1,200. I'm not sure if the the installation has a lower cap under that. There are certain things that do, but I think the total cap for installation is $1,200 per year. And for those tax credits, the total amount resets year after year. So you could do, one installation project like in your crawl space one year, and then a different installation project like in your attic the next year, and sort of spread your projects out and take the tax credit multiple times too.
I think you may have mentioned this, but how does a non-taxable entity claim a 30% tax credit for building electrification?
For the building electrification, which I'm not sure which tax credit that was referring to specifically. Let me see if I can go back. For something like the commercial building tax credit, for example, you would basically transfer that tax credit to the designer who does have to pay taxes. And then they would basically lower your cost, ideally by whatever that tax credit was.
A number of people were saying they couldn't see the IRS FAQ in the chat. I just put it in again. If you still can't see it, please let us know.
Let me see it.
Someone's asking, why would you get a heat pump water heater instead of a regular electric water heater?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a heat pump water heater is actually about 3 times as efficient as a regular electric water heater. So you can end up saving a lot of money by installing a heat pump water heater on your electricity or gas bills. So they can be a normal water heater. An electric water heater is usually about 100% efficient. So you get in exactly the same, or you get out the same amount of heat as you put in as energy. A heat pump water heater can be like 300% efficient. So you basically get out 3 times as much heat as energy you put in, which is pretty cool. So that ends up translating to much lower electricity bills. So if you currently have electric resistance water heater, a heat pump can be a really easy swap because you've already got the electrical wiring you need for it, and you'll end up saving money on your electricity bills. If you currently have a natural gas water heater, it can be a little bit more complicated because you need new wiring, but still a heat pump water heater can be a really good solution, particularly with that tax credit of up to $2,000. I think that can help a lot with a heat pump water heater installation.
So I was asking about what's meant by the manufacture of critical minerals. Aren't they mined or perhaps reclaimed from recycled material?
Oh yeah, and someone just wrote a note in the chat that there are 120-volt heat pump water heaters that just plug into a wall outlet. There's one model of those that's out already, so that's another really good solution if you have a natural gas water heater. For the critical minerals, I'm not super familiar with that in particular. I think that I think we'll know more also once guidance is released, probably next month. But I think that there are
Oh, we seem to have a freeze.
At least it wasn't earlier on.
That's true. I think Cora may have been trying to, we've got a lot of questions about nonprofits and other non-taxable entities that I think Cora answered, but it can be a little complicated. So I think basically the answer is that the installer or the contractor can take the tax credit, and that can be part of the negotiations in terms of what the total cost of the project is going to be.
Hey, welcome back, Cora.
Hi, Cora. Glad you could come back. So another question is there any incentive to buy a plug-in hybrid car? For the same amount of battery capacity, 4 plug-in hybrids will usually result in much more carbon reduction than 1 electric and 3 regular gas cars. Cora, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I think, can everyone see me now? I hope.
Yes, we can.
All right. Sorry about that. So I live in Los Angeles, and we've had these pretty wild storms for the past couple days, and I think a bunch of places still had power out, and they're just restoring power today. So I think my internet and power have been going kind of on and off today because of that. So could you repeat the question about hybrid cars, Francis?
Someone's asking if there's a tax credit for plug-in hybrids.
There is not. That tax credit is just for EVs.
Yeah, well, a plug-in hybrid, at least when I got mine in Maryland, there was a Maryland tax credit because it's a kind of sort of EV, but I guess science and technology has marched on since then.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the IRA tax credit is just for full EVs. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Oh,
sounds-
it looks like someone's saying partial hybrid electric vehicles qualify. So I might be wrong about that, but there might be
Yeah.
certain battery capacity requirements you have to meet.
Yeah, I think it's at least it used to be based on your battery capacity. Now, someone said that they had heard that you couldn't get the rebate unless you went totally electric. Is that true?
No, you can get the rebate for a single appliance upgrade too, but it has to be a transition from at least the way it's written, it has to be a transition from a fossil to an electric appliance. So you can get it for transitioning from electric resistance to efficient electric. But as far as I know, you don't have to electrify your whole home. You could do it for just a heat pump or just a heat pump water heater, for example.
Someone's asking if they're if tankless if there's is there such a thing as a tankless heat pump water heater? I don't think I've run into one, but are those on the market?
No, there are not. Yeah, there's tankless gas and tankless electric, but no tankless heat pump. I don't think that's possible because I don't think you can generate that same amount of instantaneous heat with a heat pump. It's generally a slower process to generate the heat, which is okay if you have a tank, you've got a lot of storage room. I do know that they're working on heat pump water heaters of different sort of aspect ratios. Like there are certain water heaters that are like low boys to fit in small spaces. And currently the number of models of heat pump water heaters is a little bit limited, but they're working on developing these different models for sort of direct replacements for all types of existing water heaters.
So said they have a 24-year-old heat pump and they'd like to upgrade to a new one. Can they get a rebate for that and their LMI?
Oh, that's a great question. So the rebates, my understanding of those is that you can only get them from a fossil to electric transition. And tax credits, I'm not sure, but I would definitely look into that. You might be able to get a tax credit for that.
Okay. Same person was also wondering about, they have a solar hot water heater, but it doesn't work when it's overcast. And could they get a rebate for putting in a heat pump water heater?
Similar answer to the last question. I think this is going to depend on what states decide to do and what guidance DOE decides to issue, but my understanding is that the rebates are going to be mostly transitioning from fossil to electric. So most likely not on the rebate side, but possibly on the tax credit side. I'm not sure about that, but I would check the IRS FAQ document that we shared in the chat.
And who's responsible for informing and assisting applicants?
That is for applicants for the rebate programs, I'm assuming.
And I would assume so. They might also be asking about the tax credits. They didn't say for sure.
Okay. For the rebate programs, that will be sort of determined on a state-by-state basis. I hope that states set up really good programs to help assist people and make the application process as easy as possible. And we're definitely working on that from an advocacy perspective. For tax credits, that would be sort of whatever the person is who helps with taxes in general. So there's free tax preparation help I know of on sort of like the local or state level, or something like your tax advisor or TurboTax or anything like that.
Someone just pointed out to me that we are, although we're not running out of questions, we're running.
Francis, you got muted, but we are at the hour. Sorry,
Yeah.
Francis.
Yeah, we are running out of time before we're running out of questions. So just wanted to let you know that there are 2 action items to tell your local leaders to get going on this and to check out the Rewiring America guide on how to electrify your home, which will answer a lot of questions. And please don't forget to mark your calendars for our next national call. In this together, connecting with your community to combat the climate crisis by Mary Ann Krasny, and it's going to be on March 28th at 7 p.m. And to register, just click the link in the chat box or visit the website at eldersclimateaction.org/events. And I apologize to everyone whose questions didn't get answered. We will be sending out the recording. Cora, people also wanted the slides. So what can they have access to the slides?
Yep. Yeah, I'll share those with you too. Yep.
So that watch out for that in your email. And thank you all so much for coming.